So Intel is dropping the I. Yeah, not like it's confusing at all. Yeah, we'll talk about it. So to be clear, they're not dropping the I off of Intel. That's going to stay. I mean, they've been called Intel for decades now, and that's not going to change. What they are dropping is they are dropping the I part before, say, i5, i7, i9. So it's going to just be Core Ultra 5 and then a number. And they're going to start the numbering sequence over again because it's not like 13900K or 10105F or 11400F just flows off the tongue very well. But we get used to saying Core i5 whatever, and now that's going to change. Now, this came up because there was a couple of benchmarks that showed up for a game called Ashes of the Singularity. This was rumor. This was, hey, did you see it? This was whatever. And Intel would not confirm it. However, they did confirm that their Celeron processors and Pentium processors would no longer be called Celeron or Pentium. That were just going to be called Core processors. Now we're going to have an Ultra Core processor, a Core Ultra 5 or Core Ultra 7, and then whatever number behind. Theoretically, they can start over again and say 1000. It'd be the first generation. But it's not really the first generation. I don't know. Maybe it's the first generation. Currently, they use a setup on their chips called Land Grid Array, or LGA 1700, because that's 1700 pins that make contact between the motherboard and the CPU. Okay, got me so far. The 12th generation and 13th generation follow that. So that means those two processors can use the same motherboards in most cases. So you have that, and then Intel lately, over the past several years, has been giving us a new generation, pretty much every year. Now, you're going to run into a little bit of thing here because the 13900, some of those processors and 13700s, some of those came out earlier this year. So theoretically, you might have until next year to put something out, but you can't really wait too long next year because then it will have been more than a full year because all that stuff came out in Q1. So if you're waiting more than that, then you're giving AMD a chance to really get ahead, and they've already proven that they can put a pretty fast chip out there with their Vcache. Now we're going to talk about an AMD because their naming scheme sometimes is not much better, but we're talking about Intel here. So now we've got a little bit of an issue because 14th gen Intel is supposed to be coming up, but is that when you make the naming change? Because if you decide, there are some rumors they might do a refresh of 13th gen and call it 14th gen. But if you call that now Core Ultra 5 whatever, and it fits on the same motherboard as the 12th and 13th, that's a whole other set of confusion. I mean, are you seriously going to try to tell me that I have two different types or two different names or two different nomenclatures for processors that go on the same board? But are you really ready to switch to the new processing or the new form factor, which should be LGA or Land Grid Array? I believe it's 1851, so 1851 chips. But you haven't even, I mean, there doesn't seem to be any kind of announcement or any rumor on coming up on when that might come out. So if something like that doesn't come out until, say, the middle of next year, you've gone well over a year without putting out a processor, but you can't really change the name of your processors and stick them on the same motherboard as your 12th and 13th gen. Because now you're really creating some confusion. Do I put a Core i5 on there, or do I put a Core Ultra 5, or what do I, who knows? Now, to me, it probably didn't come up, wasn't thought of. The time to rename something probably would have been around 12th gen. I'm sorry, 12th is when the new set of motherboards and all that stuff, the LGA 1700. But it was also when they went to performance cores and efficiency cores. So when you make that architecture change, that probably would have been the time to rename the style or rename what you're going to call your processors. It's a new generation. Because technically it is. It's a different process. You might be able to get away with it if you're going to put your Vcache or something like that on top of your processor, or maybe the AI aspect of it when you're putting, say, tensor cores or something. But that's not going to go on this motherboard. So then what do? Well, you could have a refresh of 13th generation and call it the 14th gen. But then you've got three generations of chips that go on the same motherboard, and Intel hadn't done that in a long time. So that in itself is confusing. How How are you going to work this? Now, you could do something, keep it 13th gen, but introduce some new processors and call it a refresh. You could have like a 13750K or a 13950K and probably get away with it if you introduce those later this year. And maybe they'll have V-cache on them or that extra memory that's on the die itself or on the processor itself without having to go offload that somewhere else on the motherboard. Maybe that's an idea. Who knows? But regardless, you're going to have some confusion because we've already got confusion. But by the time, it's taken us, a dozen years to get used to saying whatever. I'm not so sure that by the time they redo this and we get used to calling something a Core Ultra 5, that about the time we get used to saying that, they're going to switch off and do something else too. So who knows? One thing's for sure, they've got themselves in a little bit of a pickle. They have to upgrade and they have to try to keep up with AMD, who's been really aggressive right now. But how are they going to do that when they still are like in the middle of a name change and all that stuff? Now, they might have a master plan. They might come out next month and say, oh, by the way, we're going to do this, this, and this, and it's all going to happen, December of this year or Q1 of next year, and have all this figured out. And we would be dumbfounded and surprised, and maybe that's the way it ought to be. But until then, it's like, you're really leaving the door open for your competitor to kind of make some serious strides and really kind of try to prove that they have the fastest gaming chip or whatever, fastest gaming CPU. Now, AMD they're not guiltless in all this name confusion either, because they have, on purpose in many cases, tried to name their motherboard chipsets and their processors similarly enough to Intel for brand recognition. And it doesn't matter what anybody tries to say, but they've finally got themselves where they're putting out a video card that's a 7000 series and a CPU that's a 7000 series. And believe me, that doesn't confuse anybody when you say that you're looking at a Ryzen 5 7000 or an RX 70 whatever, 7600. Or sometimes if you just talk and you just mention that you've got a 7700, are you talking about the processor or are you talking about the graphics card? Because, sometimes that really gets confusing. And until lately, they had been doing odd number 1000 series, like 3000, 5000, 7000. They had been doing those for desktop, and then the even number, 4000 or 6000, were their laptops and their notebooks. Well, they've gone away with that in this generation as well. 7000 series, now we're doing not only desktops and GPUs, but now you're doing notebooks with the same 7000 series also. But there's a caveat to that. So the first number is 7000 because that's the series that we're on right now. Then the second number is going to be what tier it is, whether it's a Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7, Ryzen 9, maybe even a Ryzen 3 eventually. The next tier will be what generation of Zen processor is in it. So not as if you're like confusing anything here at all, but now you can get a brand new processor that might be on Zen 2 platform, which is 3 years ago. Or you might buy something you think is a really good processor, but it's Zen 3, which is 2 years ago, or last year, or 2 years ago. So you're not confusing anybody at all, are you? And it's even more confusing because you've got 20 for Zen 2, you got 30 for Zen 3, you got 35 for Zen 3 Plus, and you got 40 for Zen 4 and 4 Plus. It's almost laughable to try to explain the numbering scheme. They did at least separate stickers in all the publications and on the notebooks themselves and stuff like that, where the gray stickers are the older generation of Zen and the orange ones are the newer ones. However, even if you're getting a newer one, you still might get the wrong laptop because they have HX is the identifier for the performance laptops. They have HS for your regular laptops, and they have U for the ultra thins that are 15 watt. So, yeah, if I'm trying to get a 7745 U or 7745 HX or HS, or what am I getting? I can probably get like a 7935 U and think I'm getting a pretty good laptop when I should have actually got something that was maybe a 7745 HX, which would have been a much better laptop. And I would be looking at the two going, why is the price difference? Well, the performance is very different, and the generation is different, and there's several things that are different, and the wattage is different, and just not confusing at all. So it's not as if Intel or AMD is completely without any kind of blame here, but Come on, guys. My best hope for Intel is that they figure out some way of saying this is the new process, whether it's Vcache or whether they've changed something or they've added something, and say, okay, here's the new motherboard and the new generation, and we're going to call it this, and everybody's happy. At least until we get used to saying it that way, and then they're going to change it again anyway. It's Intel. They can't help themselves. If you're not familiar with the story, I believe it's the scorpion and the frog trying to cross the river. Yeah, the frog's like, I'm not taking you across the river. You're gonna sting me, and then I'm gonna die. And the scorpion says, well, why would I do that? Because if I sting you, then I'm gonna die too, because you're gonna drown, and I'm gonna go under with you. And so the frog finally thinks, okay, well, that sounds good. All right, well, I'll go ahead and give you a ride over. They get about halfway over, the scorpion stings him. The frog says, why'd you do that? Now we're both going to die. Can't help it, I'm a scorpion. Same thing with Intel. They can't help it, they're Intel. Anyway, if you found the video entertaining or thoughtful or just as confusing as I have over the past several weeks trying to look at this stuff, go ahead and throw a like on it. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I certainly would appreciate it. I'm really trying to drive sometime this year to get to 1,000 so I can start monetizing this channel a little bit, and that would be really cool. So if you could help do that, I would certainly appreciate it. If you don't do anything else, you can, of course, hit up all my socials and all that stuff. I'm going to do more stuff on the gaming channel. I've already started posting some shorts and some game highlights, and we'll probably do live streaming there soon. But in any case, if you don't do any of that stuff or hit my other socials, at least do one very important thing for me. Be kind to each other. Say good morning or say hello. Wave, smile, hold the door open, something, You have no idea what that small gesture on your part that doesn't cost you anything might do for somebody's day or their whole week. Or, in some cases, maybe it changes how they look at life. You just never know what influence you might have. So until next time, when I get myself into things I got no business getting into, that's all I got. So I'll see you later.